Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch, previously known as the Small Church Podcast. I'm Tony Marr, and with me is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everyone, we're glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and talk about real life stuff of ministry, faith, community, and maybe a little sports and pop culture.
Yeah, if you're expecting a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
We're more about those honest heart-to-heart conversations, like the ones you'd have on the front porch with friends. Sometimes we stay on track, and sometimes we take the scenic route.
That's half the fun, isn't it? Here we tackle the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of church and of life. Every now and then, we'll welcome a few friends to the front porch and share stories and ideas that might just change the way that you see things.
So whether you're a pastor, a church leader, or just someone who loves the church, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch. We've got a seat waiting for you.
Good morning. Welcome into the Pulpit and Porch. I am your host, Tony Marr, along with my other host and good friend, Robert Kell. And we hope that you all are doing well this morning. Robert, how are you this morning?
I am, personally, I'm great. I'm in Cowboys abyss right now with coaching decisions and ownership decisions and all of those things.
Yeah, it's a rough time.
It's
of course it's been a rough time.
It's been a rough time for like 35
decades.
years,
yeah.
but and so yeah, so
you could be the Seahawks who finished 10-7 and didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I forget sometimes you're a Seahawks fan, and so it's just you're so like Vegas, California, and all of your other teams, or I should say Nevada, California, but
I'm about to mute your mic.
What?
It's Nevada.
Oh, I'm a redneck from the South. And you're just lucky I got all the syllables in there.
That is, if you want to offend me quickly, that's one of the, what do Appalachia? You like when people say that?
If you say Appalachia, I'll throw Appalachia. Yeah. I mean, I always kind of look at it and go, if you want to be wrong, that's okay. And so I don't know. I mean, do you know anybody around here that says, how do you say it?
Nevada.
Do you know anybody around here other than you?
Everybody who knows me, because if they say it wrong, they're corrected very quickly.
Yeah, that won't happen. That's it's like people I think a lot of people say Florida, and I'm like, it is not an A, it's an O, Florida. I mean, I don't get it. So
Nevada.
Yeah, I mean, it's just emphasis on syllable. I mean, it's just,
but it's accent. A very important emphasis there. Very, very important.
Yeah, well, so be it. Yeah, there you go.
Go to Nevada and call it like that and see how long you last. It's dangerous.
I'm probably not going to be in Nevada going, hey, y'all know where Nevada is?
Nevada? Point my way to Nevada? I can't believe that even just came out of my mouth. Man, I feel dirty now. I need to go get some mouthwash.
I have a better chance of getting you to say you're a Celtics fan than to say Nevada again.
Probably, yeah. Speaking of the power of words have such a powerful impact on us. My wife was telling me a story last night. She's on within her company that she works for. She's on this leadership council of a select few agents in the real estate world that are part of this leadership council. And so they've been doing some trainings and stuff on just a lot of the things that we've been talking about on the show for the last several weeks, goal setting for 2025 and priorities and self-improvement and all these kind of things. And so she sent this long message to one of her clients that is one of her great clients. And with my wife, her clients become friends most of the time. And she does better than anyone else that I've ever seen in her line of work in really connecting personally with the people that she works with. And so she sent this long email to this lady and her husband that live in California and that they've been working with a lot. And she was telling her all about her new goals and how they were going to be beneficial in her business and how they were going to be all these things that she was doing. And she said this in, again, 500-word essay that she wrote her. And in one paragraph, she said, I've made some very intentional goals for this year that aren't going to be positive in our working relationship. She meant to say are, but it auto-corrected for some reason to aren't. And so in all of these beautiful things that she said, one word, she said, I've made some very intentional goals for this year that aren't going to be positive in our working relationship. And then we were on a date. So she didn't notice that she'd sent that, and she had her phone on silent. And the lady from California had wrote back and said, I'm so thankful for you, but I'm sitting here heartbroken that you're canceling our working relationship. And Amanda manages some of their rental properties here in the Tri-Cities and has been working with them on some other projects and other things. And so she said, I'm sitting here talking with my husband, just devastated and heartbroken that you're canceling our working relationship. And Amanda didn't see it for an hour. And so this poor lady had been sitting there, and Amanda looked back, opened up her phone or turned on her phone, and saw that this one word wrong from are to aren't completely changed the dynamic of a 500 word or whatever letter. And so she had to quickly call her and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That was supposed to say are. They are going to be very positive in our professional relationship going forward. And the lady just started crying and saying, I've been sitting here panicking, saying that we're losing you. And I'm so sad that we're losing you. And I'm so thankful now. Like, the power of words, man, isn't the power of one word. And so next time that you say the word that you said, think of the power that you hold.
I don't think that's the same thing.
I would disagree with you. You don't know what that means to my heart.
I think too, it's one of those things like because I don't think that's the same thing at all. Like exactly what I was saying. There was no doubt. You just don't like it. You don't think it's right. You think it's different. I think that's the same way when Brent Musburger, whoever it was saying Appalachia, and it's like that's just that like I'm going like that's just wrong, but I knew what he was saying, and so it was just one of those things. But yeah, no, I think that's hilarious and sad for Amanda, and I'm glad all that's worked out, and they didn't hire somebody else in the hour.
Yeah.
That
so are we.
That Amanda was looking, but at the same time, yeah, that's I don't think they're the same thing. We'll just have to agree to disagree. Tomato, tomato is my way of saying this is your way and the right way, I guess.
Right. And my way is the right way.
Nobody says tomato.
I would think that if you were to go to the place that you're talking about, then the way that they would say it would be the correct way.
Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing, there's definitely nothing malicious on my side of saying that. It's just accent stuff. I say lots of words that would
comes across very malicious, very offensive.
I say lots of words that are like that. So
speaking of offensive, we are having another discussion today about artificial intelligence. And we've done this before on this show. It has
been like a year, though.
It's been about a year. And last time that we talked about it, it was a complete accident. We hit record on our episode, meaning to talk about something else, and we got off on a tangent and ended up spending an hour and a half talking about artificial intelligence.
And one of the reasons we did that was, if I remember correctly, it's been a while. I think that we had a guest that the technology broke down.
You're right.
Yeah. And so we had a guest
that we've never been able to get back on.
No. And so they ended up getting on for 4 minutes, and they were like, yeah, I've got an appointment in 8 minutes. And which we'd had a hard time doing the episode anyway. The time frame that we were on were not going to work out very well.
But maybe a lot of our listeners are saying a 4-minute episode might be great for you guys.
Yeah. I don't know. But then I was using Chat GPT to look for ideas, because that was where we were like, hey, we need to talk about something. And at that point in time, we were still pretty young in the show, and we were still learning some things. I mean, I know we're still learning. I mean, I think in life, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. There's not a lot of neutral moments that you get to just sit when it comes to career and work and things like that. You kind of have to be moving forward. But yeah, so I think I actually used ChatGPT to go, hey, we were looking at ideas, and we had a couple of things there. Bruce was throwing some things around, and you were, and I think we ended up starting a whole conversation because I use Chat GPT, and I think you almost just hit record in the middle of a conversation, and we just continued to what we were talking about.
Yeah. And even since that episode a year or so ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that, there's been so many developments in the world of artificial intelligence that this conversation, I think, is very warranted, especially in the context that we're going to be talking about it today.
Yeah. I mean, and it's going to be interesting to see because like AI and the version that we know it is like 2017. So here we are, early 2025. We're about 7.5, 8 years into what this journey is. But AI, as far as a lot of the moving pieces that go, you can really start to track it back into to the 50s, which is crazy to me. That when you think about some of the things that are automated and stuff like that, I don't think about some of that in the same way I think of what we're going to talk about. And we'll talk about both these things today, but I don't think about some of those things in the same way.
Yeah. In doing some research for this episode today, I found this statistic that absolutely blew my mind, and it goes into exactly what we were just talking about. That according to a McKinsey report in 2022, so in 2022, 50% of organizations globally reported adopting artificial intelligence in at least one business function. Okay, so in 2022, 50%. In 2024, 90% of organizations said that they were actively using artificial intelligence in their business practices.
So, I mean, the question for me always starts to come, and then we're going to get way deeper into this, but I don't think this is something like I struggle sometimes with replacing, because one of the conversations is always putting AI into place, good AI into place, artificial intelligence into the world. It fixes human error, but actually, like, minus this one moron that like he retired, but he was going to get fired regardless. The umpire from last year that was just calling, I mean, balls and strikes that were the
Angel Hernandez.
Yeah, that were the width of your desk. And I know you can't see Tony's desk, but it's a big desk. I mean, that were the width of your desk outside of the zone. I mean, it was insane what he was doing. And so outside of the occasional person, like, I actually like the human error. I like the fact that an umpire has a zone that's a little, shifted one way or another, and it's a little up, it's a little down, it's a little, their strike zone is going to be a little low and outside, and you've got to adjust to that as a hitter, and you also get to adjust to that as a pitcher. I think a lot of umpires, they don't intentionally go in. They go in saying, I'm going to be center, and as I don't know, the way the sun's shining, the way the pitcher's throwing, the way the catcher's framing, the way the hitters are standing, they adjust a zone unintentionally to be a touch inside or a touch high. And pitchers see that and they adjust to it. Well, then you get nine guys that go through a lineup, and then they go, hey, we're starting to see this now. I mean, you think about, teams like, I mean, good hitting teams, the Dodgers, of course, the Yankees. I mean, you look at the Phillies, the Braves, so these teams that are really good hitting teams. And as they're walking in, they're always talking to each other, and they're going, hey, what was that? What was this? Hey, how's this? And everything's on iPads and all these other things now. And they're having these conversations. And it's one of the reasons that if a pitcher can get through 18 batters, the lineup twice, it's like you've done your job, because pro hitters, you're not going to get a third chance usually unless you're just really on and they're really off that day. And I love the human aspect of that. And so I know that this year with pro baseball in preseason, we're getting automated strike zones.
Yeah, they're going to give it a go.
AI strike zones. And they've been doing that in AAA or AA? AAA. I knew you would know that for sure. And I thought it was AAA, but I couldn't remember if it was double or triple. But I like the human element. And I'll talk more about that, I'm sure, with some things as we're going. But that's just my thought is I hate to see AI does there come a point in time that people actually have a hard time getting a job And, right now it's like I grew up in an era where if you didn't have a job, just go apply for one. And now we're starting to say 90% of companies in the country of the world, in the world, 90% of the companies in the world have automated something since 2022 that they did not automate before. So since COVID, they have automated something that was not previously automated. And I think AI is growing faster than it's ever grown before. And we're facing something way different than we have in the past.
You even look at just the change from our last episode, as we talked about, it's a completely different world when it comes to this. And some other statistics that I found that blew me away. But yet, when I really thought about it, it wasn't that shocking that worldwide, 80% of customer interactions globally are done through artificial intelligence. And, we want to say that's taken away the human element, but it's been that way for quite a while, that you call into any company now and it's exhausting. Hit 1, hit 7, hit 5, hit 3, hit 12. And you're probably never going to talk to an actual person. Everything is done. And sometimes you don't even know if you're talking to a real person or if you're talking to artificial intelligence induced or generated person on the other line, because the technology has gotten so advanced that sometimes it's even hard to tell the difference. But it's not like this is completely new. For me, it's something that terrifies me because of the advances in the technology over the last probably 18 months, 24 months. I think ChatGPT changed the game for the general public. For people that are involved in this world, I don't know that it was anything revolutionary because they were already working in those spaces for so long. But for the general public, I think ChatGPT becoming a public platform that could be used by anyone really changed the game. But when you think about it, we've been using AI for the last decade or more. When you look at things like Siri that we have on our phone and on your Apple Watches, I remember I got the invitation. Goodness, this had to be back. I could probably look up and find out when it was. But I got the invitation from Amazon to be one of the first people to try Amazon Echo. And I still have it. It's a tall cylinder tube. Now they're tiny. You can hardly even see them. You can hide them anywhere. But this one was a big, black, tall cylinder tube that I remember when it first came in the mail and setting it up and plugging it in. Me and my kids sat around it for hours just asking it questions and having it tell us jokes and bedtime stories and all of these different things, that we were blown away by the capabilities that this little speaker, this tubular speaker, could accomplish. And so AI has been around for a while, but it actually took me back when I realized, oh, hold on, that is artificial intelligence. Siri that I ask, and I need to be careful or my phone's going to beep over here on the phone.
I think you have to use the words "hey" before, but like right there, I just did, and it popped up.
But we've been using it for a while without really realizing. And you read all of the articles, and we've all experienced it and talked about how creepy it is that you say something in your living room about a product, and then the next time you get on the internet, you have ads for that product all over because the Alexa that you have sitting in your kitchen has picked it up, and now all of your shopping functions and browsing functions are filled with ads for the thing that you were talking about, that we're being spied on and listened to by artificial intelligence all the time. And yet I don't go into my kitchen and unplug the thing, because I love the fact that I can say, hey, Alexa, set a 30-minute timer when I've got my Tombstone pizza in the oven. And it's been around for a while, but it's changed so rapidly in the short period of time that it really has overtaken our culture and our society, especially in the business world. And it's starting to really have an impact in the spiritual world as well.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's one of those things like, Alan Turing, the Turing test that was in the 50s that came along, where the goal was to see if a machine could replicate a human to a point that people could not tell. And so he was one of the original guys that started putting this to the test. And there was, I just went blank on the college, Dartmouth, I think's right. They took a group of people in like 1956 and took a game called Go, I don't know if you've ever played Go or not. The board looks
No, I
like
haven't.
something a little bit like a chess board, almost checkerboard, and it's a little bigger. And you have black and white stones. And so, I think Othello, is that the name of the game where you backgammon, Othello, some things like that.
I played
that you can play with black and white, but it moves around.
Checkers.
And it started to change things.
You ever played that one?
Yeah, I have played checkers. That one I know.
Good game.
Yeah, I've not played backgammon. But they started doing this, and it trained. They took 10 weeks in a summer. They wanted to see if they could teach a robot. This is 1956. If they could teach an AI like to learn a game.
Were you alive then? I wasn't alive then. I don't know if you were.
I was really young. No, I was 20 years away. And so, 19 to be specific, but like it was that whole moment of they trained and they taught it through showing it multiple games. And then every game it played, it learned to a point that over like an 8 month to a year period, it played a world champion and beat it 4 out of 5 games. It played the human world champion, of course. And we've seen that happen in chess later on in I believe it was the late 60s or 70s. Yeah. Russian chess player got pretty embarrassed by, a guy that no one could beat got it handed to him by a robot. And that's the thing about this, is that Chat GPT and stuff is, and AI in general, I think you and I say Chat GPT, and I think it's a lot like saying Kleenex. It's actually a tissue, but Kleenex is the, we say, hey, do you have any Motrin? Well, Motrin is a brand. Ibuprofen is the stuff. And so, we get these.
Do you say Coke as universal for all soft drinks?
So I used to. I don't anymore. I grew up in a world where it's like, you want a Coke? Yeah, grab me a Pepsi. And I didn't
ask if you wanted a Pepsi.
I just wanted a Coke. I don't have Pepsi. I have Coke. That's why I said. And so I probably would say, do you want a soft drink? I grew up in a world where people called it pop and stuff pop. Like, yeah. It's just, again, very, I think I grew up younger in Alabama. It was Coke. You want a Coke? Everything was a Coke. And then in Virginia, it was pop. And like I was even talking to one of my sisters the other day, and one of them said, "Yeah, do y'all want to eat pop?" And I'm like, "Man, I have not heard that in a long time." And so, anyway,
which part of the country is soda?
I don't know. It's not in the 2 places not in the 2 or 3 places I've lived most of my life. But I don't know soda. Is that a North thing?
I don't know. We said Coke or soft drink.
Over on the West Coast where you lived?
Yeah.
In that place?
Yeah. Can you say it?
That shall not be named?
Can you say it right?
Nevada?
You got it. Yeah.
Woohoo! I had to think. I was like, how do I say it normally now? It's all in my brain. I'm like all out of thing. So, I think that when we look at AI with where we're at now with all of these different platforms, thank you. On my iPad, I have a folder, and I've got 7 AI programs in that folder.
Wow.
And I use 1 or 2 of them. I don't use most of them. I was just listening to a guy one day talk about some stuff like that, and I was going, I'll download them. And I haven't used them. A lot of them end up timing out. But I think, when we talk about something like ChatGPT, I've got friends. I remember telling you a year ago that I could look at a text and say, hey, write a bottom line in the version of Andy Stanley and Craig Groeschel, John Mark Comer. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but having listened to those communicators as much as I had, and I was just looking for that sticky statement to go with the text that I'd been breaking down and working through and stuff. And I'm going, what's that one bottom line sticky statement? It was creepy. Even a few times when I first started playing with it, I would be like, hey, write a sermon on these verses in the style of Andy Stanley from North Point Community Church. Do the same thing with John Mark Comer from Bridgetown. And I just started listing Matt Chandler. And I would just list these pastors, and the guys that I listened to enough, like I could hear their cadence.
Change the tone?
You could read the cadence and go, that's exactly how he would. Now, I haven't done that in probably a year because I was just playing around with AI a year ago, starting to get into it a little bit. I use AI weekly. now. I don't use it daily. I use it weekly. I'm still more of a go to Google than I am Chat GPT. But it is crazy. I've got friends who have used Chat GPT and other programs so much that when it says, hey, they'll say, take this sermon I wrote, write 5 social media posts out of that. It writes it in their speech and vernacular. They have used it so much. It's starting to adapt to them. And so inside of their account, inside of their things, it's starting to learn and understand how they speak, how they write, how they do things. And that is, I'm like you, that's weird to me. I just don't know how much I'm for all of that, but that's just my opinion. And I'm not saying, I think I said this last time. I mean, it's, you listen to some leaders in this space. It's the, it's the tractor analogy. Farmer standing around with hoes and oxen and things like that. And all of a sudden the tractor comes along. Well, the tractor's not going anywhere. So you can figure out how to leverage the tractor to do what you need to do and still accomplish the goals and things you want to, or you can stand over here with an ox and go out of business. And I'm afraid a little bit that if we don't learn to appropriately, and I do think there's some appropriateness to it, appropriately use AI as it's developing at the pace that it is, I think we could get left behind on some things.
And I think that you've got a lot of people in the church world that have had that same feeling and sensed that same thing, because we've seen some great, I use the word great loosely. I use the word great in the sense of large, not good, depending on your opinion. We've seen some advancements within the church world in AI just in the last few months, some things that have made headlines that, if you haven't seen this headline, you need to go and take a look at it. There was a church in Switzerland, a Catholic church, that unveiled an AI Jesus in a confessional booth. And I sent this to you probably a month or so ago. I sent you the article on it, and I've watched subsequent videos. It's made national news, international news, mainstream news. I've seen CNN do pieces on it, USA Today do pieces on it, that they had a holographic AI Jesus sitting in a confessional booth, and people were coming in and giving their confession to artificial intelligence.
Did you read the instructions? Did you ever see those?
I did, yes.
So, like, the thing, I mean, it was, read the data protection consent form. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes my redneck comes out. Agree by pressing the blue button. Enter the room. Close the door. Speak to AI Jesus in your native language using a longer sentence. And then, AI Jesus will automatically end the conversation after a certain time and then exit the room and leave the door open. This is my favorite part. At the bottom, in bold print, it says, we take no responsibility for the generated content of the AI Jesus. If a conversation is needed, our pastoral team is available here at, there's not a chance in the world, Peter Scapella, in person or by phone, and they put their phone number on there. I'm just like, we take no responsibility.
Now, I will say they've pulled it.
They did. It actually didn't last very long.
It was an experiment that they tried, but the responses were pretty all over the board. You had some people that loved it. You had some people that came out of the confession booth crying in tears because they said, I really felt like I was just in the presence of Jesus. And you had other people that came out and said, that was really creepy. You had a lot of people saying, why did they have to make Jesus so attractive? Why was AI Jesus such a handsome man? And it
His
just,
eyes were so blue.
the response was across the board, but there were a lot of people that really connected with the AI Jesus.
I would love to know in that, and I of course I don't have any way to know this unless you found some statistic or something that I'm not aware of, or some study that I'm not aware of, but I would love to know the age of the people who loved it and hated it, because like I could see our children, you and I having kids that, range from mid-teens to pushing mid-20s, and so we've got about a 10-year gap in there of some things, 8 or 10 years, and I just wonder, like, I could see that younger generation being so used to everything in their life being automated like that, them going, hey, this is good. The tension for me is because at the end of the day, the one thing that cannot happen at this point, and is that AI can't show empathy. It cannot have a full social understanding of what all the ramifications are when it gives you blank advice, blank statement, blank idea. And that to me is kind of crazy. Is it Google that has the thing now where people are walking around and they're just having conversations and talking and doing all of this stuff, and they're walking through and their family, like, who are you talking to? And it's like, hey, Google, say hi to, and it's all of this. The whole conversation is just this smart assistant that's inside of your phone that you can now push these conversations through, and it's really removing human interaction, which is part of my concern.
Yeah, and we've got the other story that has made national news over the course of the last couple of weeks.
And both of these are inside of the church world. I mean,
right,
this is
which is why we're talking about
it's a faith podcast, and that we talk about church leadership. And
AI is in the news every day. But these couple of stories from the church world have been brought over into mainstream
You
culture.
Talk about church leaders, emails, and things like that. These were the top stories for weeks on those platforms.
Yeah, and so you've got Ron Carpenter, megachurch pastor in Greenville, South Carolina, that unveiled a personal AI of himself, that not for free, like AI Jesus, but $50 a month.
Yeah.
For $50 a month, you can subscribe and download an app on your phone that you have an artificial intelligence version of your pastor at your ready, 24/7, on demand, Pastor Ron Carpenter.
And you and I talked about that. I mean, the day that we saw that article and we were texting back and forth, there was some level of, we might have even called each other because the text got kind of crazy. And it was like, you take a church that large, thousands of people in it, there's going to be several hundred people that sign up for this. I mean, you just made $50,000 to $100,000 a year in additional income for something you don't have to do anything with.
So, but my question is, who gets that money? Is that the church, or does he get that money?
I think that would be on how they have it set up. Like I was having this conversation with some churches the other day, and I know of churches in America, I'm just going to say America, that if you work for that church, they own a portion. It's kind of like on The Big Bang Theory when Sheldon Leonard and Howard developed an idea. The school got 75% of any money that it made. And they're like, we've paid your salaries. This is what you do. And then I know another church that they're very generous. I think they pay well from what I understand, but they are like, if you write an album and we're singing your worship songs, if you write a book, it's your book. It's your album. Even if it's a sermon series that we wrote and we did, and you took that and fleshed it out at a deeper level and put it together and did that, we're good. And you did that. You go and do it. And I don't know where I'm at fully on that.
It used to be the norm in the church world that if you wrote a book while you were on staff at the church, you took time while you're working full time on here, that the church has the rights to that book. And that's really shifted.
It really has. And I think that in that too, it's like, I hate to be this way. It's like the famous pastor thing. And I don't think every pastor views it this way. I don't, I really, really don't. And the tension is, there's no way, regardless of what your field is, that unless you're just doing something that's so against your field, like if you're a botanist and you go home and you write a Christian book on spiritual warfare or something, you're going, okay, those aren't really connected. You definitely had to do work. Unless every illustration in your book is on botany, I mean, there's no connection to this. But the vast majority of us, like if you and I were going to write a book, it's probably not going to happen. Like you're probably, as much as you love the Dodgers, you're probably not writing a book on the Dodgers. You might be, I have no clue, but like, I'm just using it as an example. The vast majority of us, like, I love my sports team.
New idea.
Book
on Dodgers.
But that would be pretty unconnected to ministry. The thing that would probably be is, hey, I'm going to write a devotional. I'm going to write a book off of every podcast that we do. We're going to talk for an hour and a half, and then I'm going to start fleshing out, with the help of some AI service, what the chapters could be, and what this, and then what scriptures could go in that, and how I do this here and do this here. And then I'm going to spend 3 months fleshing out a book and writing it, and then I'm going to publish it and go. There's no way to disconnect that from. So that's a little bit of a wide thing, but I agree. I like the fact that a lot of churches are letting people kind of write things, but I think where it gets kind of sketchy is, I know one organization, like the pastor got all of the resources, the church got nothing. Very famous pastor, but the church spent thousands of dollars marketing that book, and they got nothing back from it. Well, that's unfair to say, and I'm sure somebody will say this. I'm sure people started attending the church. I'm sure that brought in new tithe dollars. I'm sure people read the book, and hopefully that pastor tithed. And so if they sold 1 million copies of a book, hopefully they tithed on that.
There was even one very high profile case that may be the one that you're referring to. I don't know, where a pastor wrote a book. The church bought 200,000 copies of the book to give out to its people selling their own bookstores, but they bought them through Amazon, which made it a bestseller, which bumped it to number 1 of the bestsellers list, which then drove major controversy. That but I tried to find some statistics and couldn't find any anywhere on Ron Carpenter's AI version of himself, how many people have downloaded the app, how many active subscribers there are. There's nothing that you could check my Rocket Money, and there's no subscription I have that's $50 a month. Mm-mm. I'm not paying $50 a month for a subscription for something. And I
have one. We have Adobe, but that's the only thing that we've got.
I guess you could count my cell phone. That's a subscription, kind of.
Yeah, but like, honestly, like guys like you and I, we haven't had home phones for decades, and I mean, I don't. So I mean, that's my only connection to the world.
Yeah.
Is I have no way to, I had no way to call my mom or my sisters or anybody else. I mean, without a cell phone. So,
well, Robert, you see these examples that we've given and several others that we're reading about. It seems like almost every day. And we'll get into a lot more of the ways that AI has made its way into modern media practices. Do these examples, do they encourage you? Do they seem like they're helpful to people, or do they concern you?
I'm. And I think if you asked our staff, and again, I feel really fortunate. Spent 2.5 hours at a breakfast meeting yesterday with our campus pastors, and it was an unbelievably encouraging, productive, like soul-filling thing. And so I really enjoy what I get to do with the people I get to do it with. But inside of that, if you asked any of our staff when we use AI for things, it's, hey, what's a sticky statement? Like, I've been known to take and go, here, take this sermon and turn it into a short story, or in something that I'm going, how could I storytell this a little bit differently? And I get some ideas from that. It'd be great if I had a friend that was an award-winning storyteller that I could call and get that same advice. But, I mean, it's just sometimes you're sitting around and asking like that. But typically for all of us, it's, hey, based on this thought, based on this paragraph, based on this idea, what's 7 social media posts that we could make? What's two YouTube script ideas? How could I do? And those are things that we get help with just because it's there. The concern for me is kind of twofold. It is one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on each of these, and we'll just take them one at a time. Like, do we get dumber? Like, is there really a part that our brains need to think and need to be active. And as we just type in, we've talked about this before. You and I both remember Relevant Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had subscriptions to their stuff for years, got a ton of great books and resources and CDs and things I would have never read and come across without them. And I remember back in like 08, 09, like a resource coming, or like one of the magazines coming in, and one of the articles, and the guy just saying, we can no longer say we don't know something. We can say, I don't know that yet, because on our phones, with even in 08, 09, 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, we could Google something so quickly and be like, who did this? What is this? What is that? What does this really mean? And we could get a very clear answer. And you and I both know this so much better. I think that in that moment, we were adding intelligence to ourselves, because at the end of the day, all we had done is go to an encyclopedia back in the 80s, or encyclopedia. How would you say it?
World Book.
If you've ever seen How I Met Your Mother, Ted said encyclopedia. He says that's the correct way to say it. Mr. Nevada.
I would say encyclopedia.
Sorry, I hadn't even planned that one. That just worked out so well. That was great. And so we would have had to look. So that feels different than what we're doing now. But when we just get information and we all of a sudden go, I don't want to write that story. Hey, write me a 500-word article on this topic. Write me, write me 3 of this out of this. Do you feel like we're making ourselves dumber, that we're actually affecting our ability to cognitively process and move through things?
I absolutely do. Just had this conversation yesterday that in reading stuff for this episode, preparing for this episode, saw that there are programs now that you can get that you type in your sermon topic or your scripture that you're covering, and it will make suggestions for you of worship songs that you can do that will correlate along the theme that you're going for, the text that you're going for. The last church that I was the lead pastor in, I sat down with my creative arts team, and we had a 3-hour meeting every week where we did that, where I sat down and we would creatively think through what would be a great song for here and for here. And here's how I'm ending the teaching. What would go great here? Or I would do a lot of splitting the teaching time up into segments. And so, I'd do part of it, and then there'd be a response or a worship song that would be sung. And then I'd come back and do another 10 minutes at the end later, sometimes even in 3-4 segments throughout the course of a Sunday morning. And that was, we had to think, we had to work, we had to brainstorm. We would put things up on a whiteboard. And now you just simply put in, I'm teaching on Romans chapter 1, and it will give it to you. We don't have to think anymore. I think that it's taking away our creative abilities. It's taking away that whole side of your brain that you have to have creative thoughts and even critical thoughts for yourself, that it can do it for you now.
How do you think, like when we talk about jobs that are being taken away, and as a creative, like these are things I look at, I'm raising creatives and things along those lines, like, or at least a creative. Excuse me. I'm sorry. That's the position. Like, I'm just going to say the church. Actually, I can say it in any world, because I was going to say the church world specifically, and maybe we can look at that, but like, that's the position that's being eliminated. Like, we are eliminating creative teams out of the church, and God is a creator. And this is the tension for me in this, is we're made in the image. And so, kind of start looking at the scripture side of this thing, that we were made in God's image.
It's the first thing we know about him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's creator, and he makes us in his image as he speaks the world into existence. And we're creating, and he gave us the ability to create, which is amazing. And the reality is, every tool, every item from the beginning of time is a tool, and it has the potential for good and evil. We see that with Cain and Abel early on. I mean, with basic rocks and sticks that, used for good, and then almost immediately used for evil. Like we see this. I mean, like there's Gutenberg printing press. Like, it's something that that, was made, and look at all of the good that it's done. I mean, it made books available to
and
common
even back
folk.
then, people were boycotting and rioting,
Yes.
saying that it was going to be the end of literacy in the world because of the printing press, that people were not going to be able to write anymore. They were going to forget how to use a pen and paper.
Which, funny enough, now that we've moved into computer era, do all of your kids know how to write in cursive?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, mine don't either. And people,
I don't even think they teach it anymore.
They don't. And so that's not a homeschool thing. That is because you and I both have kids who do kind of public school from home is what I'll call it. It's online academy. And so they have teachers and they have all these things. They're in class together, some. And so they're not being taught that. And then I didn't teach that. So I don't know if that's true or not true or whatever. I don't think typing's a real valid thing that a lot of kids learn anymore. It's painful watching a younger generation type a lot of times, as opposed to what I was taught to do when I was in high school back in the 80s and 90s. I guess 90s, but but like this whole thing of you take the press, all the good that was done, it made books available to the common man.
The good news that we have is that it only took 600 years for those people to be proved correct, that the Gutenberg press would eliminate literacy, at least formal writing.
1864 or something.
1440, I think.
1440. Sorry, I used 600. Yeah. And so
that's something my education taught me that I actually remembered.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you kind of get through that space. But then at the same time, the printing press, the Bible was able to be put in, millions of people's hands because the press could make it faster than somebody sitting over there hand stitching it and writing every word. At the same time, it's created a lot of not good content. I mean, magazines and things like that get delivered in, covered packages because they're not great content. You think about, would we have the news we have today? Would we have this worldwide news had the printing press not come out and newspapers could do this daily, the dailies? You get a small daily paper, then a larger weekly paper that you get the dailies of, here's the, I want to say gossip, but that's not really the probably right word to use, but just these daily updates of what's going on, every little thing. And through that has advanced to a place that now that we have social media, I was thinking the other day, do you remember when we were kids watching Sports Center and it was
my family didn't have cable.
Oh, okay. The lead in to Sports Center was always this teaser of, did your team win or lose? Well, there was no way to know. There was no internet. Yeah. And now it's just straight up like, Pat Mahomes, and the Chiefs blow so-and-so out of the thing. And I'm going, man, where's the teaser? Like, I know what's happened now. Like, I still want to but they don't.
My Sports Center was the newspaper.
Yeah. And so you have those things. And so yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's my concern. My other question is more from the spiritual side. Like, and again, people could really push back on me on a lot of sides here. And so if somebody feels like that social media is something that I need to be more actively pursuing writing and not asking some AI service to teach me or to help me write 7 social media posts.
Well, hold on. Before you get to your second question, I want to answer your first one that you said, how do I feel about what it's doing for the future? And you were talking about, you have a creative. I just had to write a check for college tuition for one of my daughters who is majoring in creative writing. And I have this conversation with her all the time that in your classes, are you guys talking about AI? We both have a friend who makes his sole living off of writing. Mm-hmm. And I've had numerous conversations with him about artificial intelligence. And you just say AI and you can see his blood start to boil. Yeah. He starts twitching because there's a fear that it's going to put him out of work.
Yeah.
He's given statistics. He's told me statistics of how many artificial intelligent books are written and published every day on Amazon. And the number is staggering, that you can write a full book using ChatGPT in a matter of minutes and then have it published on Amazon You can do 6-7 books a day if you wanted to. And some people are doing that. And so I'm very concerned with what it does for our creative minds, what it does for the future of people who are in that industry. For my daughter, and she said in their classes, they're talking about it constantly. Is 10 years from now, is there even going to be a need? Are people going to pay for people to write content when they can simply have a bot to do it for them?
You and I've got a couple projects that we're talking about for 2025, 26 that we're working through some ideas, and we, this isn't. We don't just podcast for a living. We both have other jobs and responsibilities and things like that. And this is a big part of our week, but it's not the only thing we do. And so I was sitting around the other day and I was processing one of those projects, and I just typed in, here's what I want to do. And in this one particular project's like a year devotional, that an idea, you said something, it kind of inspired a thought in me. We've just scribbled down some stuff that, and I typed it in. And in literally less than 25 seconds, it mapped a 52-week, 7-day-a-week strategy plan with content for every day, 365 days.
I cannot wait to talk to you about this off the
air. And I didn't love it all.
But I personally wouldn't feel good about putting that out with my name attached to it.
Now, here's the thing I would say. When I say that, it said, oh, week 1, here's a scripture, here's a thought. And there's literally hours of work per page that would still have to be done. This was very much like, here's a random piece. And I don't know that I love the idea that it went. The thing for me is I agree with you 100%. I think that it is killing the creative career. Ultimately, we've already seen it.
Isn't that why we had a strike in Hollywood last year?
Yeah, because the AI, like they were fighting over the fact of, and not just that, and the reason the actors stepped in to support the writers is because people were they were able to reproduce the actors' voices without consent. And that's the things that are a struggle for me. And what I'm kind of bouncing through is, how do we navigate that type of thing? And I would worry. Sorry, I know we're not supposed to worry. Talk about words. I'm trying to choose my words better. I do think about, though, and like what would it be? I saw a funny reel today. There's this guy, and I've got a kid who's a musician, and so because we watch so many music reels and things like that and share them between each other, I get those that pop up. And there's this guy that he typically is sitting in a studio, his home studio, and he'll be sitting at the computer as like the director, and then he'll be dressed differently and sitting across the room as the guitar player. And he's like, hey, and he'll talk one way and then he'll talk another way, and he'll kind of cover this whole thing. Well, this time he was 3 people, and he's sitting behind the thing, and he walks in and he's like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I'm here to play the thing. Who's that? And he's like, oh, this is AI guitar. And he plays it, but it's this like from the heart, the mouth speaks type of thing of, this is coming. I mean, Landon came in last night and had put together a 2-minute project that he did 100% on his computer with pre-made sounds and stuff like that. But Hans Zimmer does the same thing. And sure. So I don't know, but so I do worry about that. Here's my other thought. Oh, sorry. Do you have anything else there?
No.
Here's my other thought. As followers of Jesus, our lives are supposed to be lived in sync with him, sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and making steps as the Spirit is leading. You and I both know, and we have probably both done at times where we want to supersede the Holy Spirit and go talk to a person about something. We don't want to be patient and wait and rest in the Father and let the Spirit do its work, so that we have to grow and process and understand and move. Whether that's writing a sermon and it's going to happen in 3 days, whether that is how do I handle this situation in my family, at my job, all of these different things, as you're praying and seeking in that moment and in that space, I'm concerned with, does AI remove the Holy Spirit from people's lives, especially with the articles that we just read? Does it remove the Holy Spirit, and does it remove the human interaction to a point that people just no longer ever sit with the Father, be still, know that I'm God, prepared a table for you in the presence of your enemies, type stuff. And we're sitting with God the Father. We're sitting with the Spirit, trusting, working, leaning, these hard things that we have to do to fight through stuff, like fasting and praying and working through something where it is just breaking you down. Are we removing that to a point that is something that's just totally different?
It's a great question that I don't have an answer for. And I know that you just said we can't say that anymore because of Google, that we can't say I don't have an answer.
I don't think we could Google this.
But it is something that I've been wrestling with for the last several days that we've been working on this episode, because throughout church history, you can go back hundreds of years. There's always been something that the church has been arguing against. There's been something that secular culture has been pushing that the church is a late adapter towards, that the church has fought. And then when it does start to make its way into the church rebels. And then you have conflict within the church. Just as recently as the 90s, 30 years ago, it was the worship wars that you saw more contemporary worship coming in, and you had a whole segment of church culture and church leadership that said, God is not in this. The Holy Spirit is not in this. This is fluff. This has no business in our churches. The devil hates drums and electric guitars, and we're welcoming Satan into our kids' hearts, and we're pushing out the Holy Spirit by this music coming in. And now you don't hear those conversations as much anymore. The church is pretty well adopted and adapted to the new way of doing things. And my initial response to your question is yes. Yes, this is dangerous. We need to stay away from it. And then I stop and I think, am I being that old man that in the 80s and 90s sat in the back of my church and said, I'm out.
I shall not be moved type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And is God big enough that he can actually use and work and move through these technological advances? He's given us the capabilities to create these things. Is he maybe working in and through those things? I don't have an answer. My initial reaction is no, but I'm trying to take a step back and say, don't be that guy in the back pew that's petitioning against everything new that's coming on. And is it something that 25 years from now, we're going to look back and say the churches that didn't adopt to this and adapt to this are now dead, and the ones that did are now using it in ways that just seem normal and seem like God is doing incredible things through it? I don't have an answer. I don't know yet.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions I have listening, and one I really appreciate that, is 20 years from now, which is, good gracious, we're 40 years out. Because I remember being in a church, big church in our area. We were in a small town, like 6,000 people in this town, and the church was running 600, 700 on a weekend. And choir, piano, organ. They had added a bass player, or they'd had a bass player for years, and everybody was fine with that, but no guitar, no drums. And they wanted to add drums. And the way they did it was in the early 90s, a Dr. Beat drum machine. And my youth pastor at the time, the thing's, probably size of my iPad and about 3 times as thick, but it's the size of an iPad, and it has a bunch of buttons on it. And one's a kick, one's a snare, one's a hi-hat, one's a tom. And he would sit up there and literally just to the beat with his fingers, with it sitting on the piano. Yeah. Everyone could see him, and he would play the drums with that Dr. beat. And I remember that journey. And then eventually behind the piano, it was kind of hidden, and they set a set of drums down there and no one could see it. And the drums would play, and they weren't shielded. They weren't covered up. They just played them quietly as they could, and they played real drums. And then eventually a little bit more got added, a little bit more got added. And I think the tension is always like, we look at hymns, and I think you and I would, like look at certain hymns, and we would go, there is great theology in those. There is unbelievable. And the church should probably still sing in some way, shape, or form some of the hymns. But the reality is I was in a traditional church for what is now half my life. And we never sang every song in that book because all songs were not equal. And so, like, we didn't say, hey, today we're singing songs 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next week we're going to do 5, 6, 7, and 8 until we sing through the whole thing. It wasn't like we were reading because certain songs were better. Just like today, you and I, we have this conversation some. There are certain worship songs that just feel very much like, that seems a lot about me. I was talking to a buddy of mine last night, and I will never apologize for this. Like, sometimes people just go, I didn't feel the worship today. And I'm like, you know what? The next time we sit down and plan, we'll put you on the list alongside God, because you were never in my thought process of whether you would enjoy what we do today. Not one moment. It was 100% for him, not for you. And so I've never stepped up and gone, man, I hope Tony feels really glorified with the song. And there are songs, though, that feel that way sometimes. When we sing them, I'm just going, this feels very much about me. So again, the worship wars, I get it. But it was unfair for my parents and their parents to treat songs that were coming out that were a little bit different the way that they did, because they treated their own songs that way. Because there were probably, I think, 400, close to 400 pages in a hymnal, call that 300 songs. And they were singing maybe 40 of them. So they were even doing that. That's so in 40
yeah, but
years, Robert,
don't you know that when the Council of Nicaea sat down, that they went through all 756 of those and hand selected them?
Yeah, the Broadman hymnal, man. That was they got the King James version and the Broadman, the hymnal. Yeah, that's it. Is that Broadman? Is that right?
I did not grow up in a church that had a hymnal.
Oh man!
Even back in the 80s, we had the old overhead projector where someone sat in the back and put the slides in.
Oh, we never had that. We had hymnals, and then I don't even know if the church I grew up in, or when I was in high school, I don't even know if it has screens now. I think it's probably still functioning with hymnals. I look at 40 years from now, because I will say there is some music that I think we need to theologically check our music a little better.
I would agree with you 1,000%.
And are we singing? So I took a really long time to get to what I'm saying here. Like, are we going to do the same thing? Are we going to just become complacent and we go, oh man, Robert and Tony, they write bangers, and every other month, man, they're dropping 2 or 3 new songs, and we're going to sing those. And maybe when Robert and Tony started, there was a lot of thought. They'd spent years kind of getting those first 2, 3, 6, 8, 10 songs out. And those first couple albums were killer. And they really were focused to the heart of the Father. Well, then they signed a music deal, and they just had to get music out. And so they started going, hey, I heard this thought the other day. Oh, that'll sing, man. Let's rhyme that out and throw it in Chat GPT and get a song, and we'll go from there. And we start just producing stuff that doesn't really point to the Father as much, that maybe gets a little more self-centered. My question is in 40 years, when we move from the 80s to now, and we look at music, when we look at AI in 40 years, are we just going to have become complacent and be okay with following the Father, like following the model of Jesus to love the Father and be obedient to him in a less intentional way. That's my concern. That's my concern with sermons. That's my concern. Like I need to wrestle with the text. I don't need to text you every time I'm struggling with a verse, and I'll try and stop. But I don't think I've ever texted you struggling. I don't know. We have talked about some verses, but I don't think I text you on a Saturday night at midnight going, "Hey, man, I got preaching 5 hours."
You could, though.
I could, and I will if I need to. But if I did it all the time,
but
and
now
you
you
just
could
write
just
in my
ask
sermons,
AI.
I can. And I can ask Google for the last decade. But we need to wrestle with the text. I don't think people understand how to study the Bible anymore. I don't think they understand how to open up God's word. And I need to make some changes in my world. I do all my devotional stuff from a tablet or a phone and things. And I need to get to some paper in my hands to where the distractions are out. And I can just be really quiet and still. And there's no chance of a notification or alert coming in and hitting that. Those are just my concerns. And I know we have jumped all over the place, and I think we've hit everything that because we both did a lot of work on this. I mean, I bought a book and tried to read an entire book in a day, and it did not happen. But I read enough that like there was just some really good things.
Yeah, we actually have, and we are about out of time for today. But I feel like there's a lot more to have on. Conversation to have on this topic that we haven't even covered, a lot. There's a lot of things that I think that we need to dive into. The specifics on, I think that some of our listeners will be shocked at how AI has already infiltrated faith communities. Some things that they are probably using maybe on a weekly, daily basis that they don't know that is driven by artificial intelligence.
Not artful intelligence.
Artful intelligence.
That would be awesome if it was artful intelligence, because that means there's a person creating art.
I also want next week, I want us to spend some time reflecting on the moral and spiritual questions that artificial intelligence raises. And I want to talk a little bit more about how people that maybe haven't broached artificial intelligence. You blew my mind a year ago when you were talking about the things that you could do. And I've tried to incorporate AI into some of my things. I tried when we changed the name to the Pulpit and Porch. I tried creating our logo in AI. And after I'd spent 30, 45 minutes with it, I got frustrated and sent you what it had done and said, "Hey, you fix this because I can't figure this stuff out." And then you came back with the beautiful thing that we have now. But the premise of that was created by artificial intelligence. I think maybe you completely redid the whole thing. I don't remember. But I've tried playing around with it. And so for those of you that are listening out there and you're saying, okay, I can see where this would maybe be beneficial, but I have no clue where to start. I want to take some time to coach you on that a little bit, give you some beginner's tips from a very beginner myself. And this is where Robert will take over, as he knows a lot more, but talking about how you can integrate artificial intelligence into your ministry in ways that can be beneficial to you and your congregation. And maybe you're thinking that can't be possible. I hope that maybe next week we can change your mind a little bit on that. And maybe by the time we sit down and talk about this again, I have an even greater understanding of my thoughts and beliefs on where this is, and more importantly, where this is going. We also have reached out to some guests to try to come and sit down with us that know more than you or I combined about this subject and see if they will lend their expertise to this subject. But where we're sitting at right now, this is all the time that we have, and we do need to call it short. So hope that you'll tune in again next week as we continue the conversation on artificial intelligence and faith communities and what that means for us here and now and in the future. We do want to encourage you to listen to the Pulpit and Porch podcast, to subscribe to the Pulpit and Porch podcast, and to interact with our show. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And Robert, where can they find us on Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah, it is Pulpit and Porch. If you just search Pulpit and Porch,
It'll come up.
It's it. Yeah.
We have a brand new Facebook page and a brand new Instagram account just specifically for the Pulpit and Porch podcast. We also want to encourage you to go to higherministries.com to find more about what we're doing and how you can connect with us here personally and not just through artificial intelligence. So remember, rate, review, subscribe, and be sure that you turn in again to next week's episode because it's going to be great. Have a great rest of your week.